Genesis chapter 9. And today we'll begin at verse 1 and going down to verse 17. Genesis chapter 9, beginning at verse 1 and going down to verse 17. And God blessed Noah and his sons and said to them, "Be fruitful and multiply and fill the earth. The fear of you and the terror of you will be on every beast of the earth and on every bird of the sky, with everything that creeps on the ground, and all the fish of the sea. Into your hand they are given. Every moving thing that is alive shall be food for you. As with the green plant I give all to you. However, flesh with its life, that is, its blood, you shall not eat. Surely I will require your lifeblood. From every living thing I will require it, and from every man, from each man's brother, I will require the life of man. Whoever sheds man's blood, by man his blood shall be shed, for in the image of God he made man. As for you, be fruitful and multiply. Swarm on the earth and multiply in it." Then God spake to Noah and to his sons with him, saying, "As for me, behold, I establish my covenant with you and with your seed after you, with every living creature that is with you, the birds, the cattle, and every beast of the earth with you, of all that comes out of the ark, then every beast of the earth. Indeed, I establish my covenant with you, and all flesh shall never again be cut off by the water of the flood, and there shall never again be a flood to destroy the earth." Then God said, "This is the sign of the covenant which I am giving to be between me and you, and every living creature that is with you for all successive generations. I put my bow in the cloud, and it shall be for a sign of a covenant between me and the earth. And it will be when I bring a cloud over the earth that the bow will be seen in the cloud. And I will remember my covenant, which is between me and you and every living creature of all flesh. Never again shall the water become a flood to destroy all flesh. So the bow shall be in the cloud, and I will look upon it to remember the everlasting covenant between God and every living creature of all flesh that is on the earth." And God said to Noah, "This is the sign of the covenant which I have established between me and all flesh that is on the earth." This is the reading of God's holy and sufficient word. Lord willing, we'll be able to make our way through this text before it gets dark on us tonight. Remember from the previous text that Yahweh God had been with Noah and his family as he destroyed all of the earth with a flood. The only survivors are the 8 people who were on the ark: Noah, his wife, their sons, and their sons' wives. Only these people are left in the earth, as well as the animals who were on the ark. After over a year of being on the ark, the ground is dry, and now they've gotten off of the boat, and God blesses Noah and his sons and their families. And what a great chapter this is. What a joyous occasion this is, that they're finally off of the ark and on dry ground. But It's a new time. It's a new time. In fact, the title of my message tonight is Life in the New World. Life in the New World. In verse 1, we see that there is a recommission to be fruitful and multiply and fill the earth. I say recommission because this was a repetition, something that Yahweh God had told Adam and Eve back in Genesis 1 and verse 28. Maybe you remember it. It's been a few weeks, but it says God blessed them, and God said to them, be fruitful and multiply and fill the earth and subdue it. Have dominion over the fish of the sea, over the birds of the sky, and over every living thing that creeps on the earth. This was God in his direction to man and his wife. God is solidly pro-life. He's solidly pro-children. This is the positive side of the commandment that the Lord gives later in Exodus when he gave the 10 commandments to the children of Israel, when he said, you shall not commit murder. God is not happy with the way things go, the killing of people and the murders that happen, including the murder of the unborn and the abortions that happen, and the way people do. And certainly it is a terrible, terrible tragedy, and it's been that way since the beginning. God has been opposed to these things. In fact, as we go on, we find that the world that they stepped out on, and we'll look some more at God's direction to Noah and his family. But notice what he says there in verses 2 and 3. It says, and the fear of you and the terror of you will be on every beast and beast of the earth, and on every bird of the sky, and everything that creeps on the ground, and all the fish of the sea. Into your hand they are given. Every moving thing that is alive shall be food for you. As with the green plant I give all to you. And so in the way that God has worded things in the Bible here, we find that man's relationship to animals seems to have changed a little bit. And so it would seem as though that where once animals had no fear of man, now they would. There would no longer be obedience and understanding, but fear and dread. I don't know exactly how things used to be before the flood, but I do know that it must have been quite different, especially if you go on yonder back to the Garden of Eden, and you figure Eve met up with a snake that talked to her, and she didn't seem that was out of the ordinary. And then all of those animals got on board of the ark, and it wasn't at all hard for 8 people to manage all of those animals that were there. And in our world, we know that there are certain animals that are domesticatable. Dogs, cats, horses, cattle, those sorts of things. But certainly there are other animals which are wild animals There's a fear and a dread in them. And so you can't very easily take a bobcat or a mountain lion or certain types of wild animals and make them to be a pet. You can't cozy up very easily next to an alligator and make it into a house pet. Certainly not like you can with a dog. And some animals will even shun man's company, while others seem to enjoy it. But in this text, in verse 3, of all of the changes that happened on this side of the flood, this is my favorite. I think this is the passage that Ken Ham calls the hot dog verse, because he says, every moving thing that is alive shall be food for you. And so God has given us the direction, given to Noah, given to us, that every moving thing that is alive shall be food for you. And so we can have every moving thing. That's what hot dogs are made out of, every moving thing. But the reality is that animals were authorized for the first time in the history of the world. For the first time, animals were authorized by the Creator for man to eat. Now, this may have been done before the flood. Certainly, there were probably some people who were eating animals. The Bible says that things were very violent before the flood. There was probably some folks who were eating animals. There may have even been some cannibalism, which is forbidden then, forbidden now. But now in this text, God gives man permission to eat animals, and thank God for it. There was probably some good reason for that. The reason, though, to us may not be obvious. Maybe the rigid environment in the New World required more proteins than before. Certainly in the Garden of Eden, they were told to eat just plants and fruits and vegetables and all that sort of thing. But maybe now they needed some protein. Perhaps this instruction was given to further illustrate the difference between man and animal. But whatever the reason is, we know that God had good reason for it. The differences between man and beast are numerous. God made man differently. Unlike animals, only man was made in the image of God. Over in Genesis chapter 1, verses 26 and 27. Then God said, let us make man in our image, according to our likeness, so that they will have dominion over the fish of the sea, and over the birds of the sky, and over the cattle, over all the earth, and over every creeping thing that creeps on the earth. God created man in his own image. In the image of God, he created him. Male and female, he created them. And so there is a distinction. Only man can have a relationship with our Creator. Only man can speak. Only man can write books and invent things. The only way that I'd ever change my mind on this is if a brute beast were to come along and rebuttal this idea. A brute beast walk up and say, I'll like to debate you, Mr. Green, on this, and we can have a debate about it. But no beast of the field or animal will ever do that, you see. But there is restriction given in our text. In chapter 9 and verse 4, God says, however, flesh with its life, that is its blood, you shall not eat. Flesh with its life, that is its blood, you shall not eat. There's some sort of a wild animal up above going to get us. Maybe a pterodactyl or something. The flesh was given for meat, but not the blood. Not the blood. The blood was given for sacrifice. And this would become clearer later in Leviticus chapter 17. Leviticus in chapter 17 and verse 11. It says, for the life of the flesh is in the blood, and I have given it to you on the altar to make atonement for your souls, for it is the blood that makes atonement by the life. And so, life and soul in these verses are the same Hebrew word. Nephesh. It distinguished animals from plants. A living plant is different than a living animal. This can be best illustrated by their deaths. If you were to go walking in the forest and you come across a tree that's fallen, a tree that's dead and decaying, a rotten tree, you might sit down on that tree and not think a thing of it. But on the other hand, if you're walking through the forest and you come across a dead, decaying, rotten deer, you're not going to sit on that, are you? The smell of it, the rottenness of the flesh, the terribleness of it. What's the difference? Well, the difference is the nephesh, the living of that animal. Well, the life of the animal spilled on the sacrificial altar was accepted by God in the substitutionary death for the life of a guilty sinner who deserved death but was permitted to live because of the sacrifice whose blood covered his sins. And in the Old Testament, all that was figurative. And it had to be repeated over and over and over. In fact, the Old Testament was a very bloody kind of a religion under the Old Covenant. Lots of blood was spilled. But in the New Covenant, what was pictured under the Old Covenant, we see in the New Covenant. Jesus came and once for all shed divine blood for sinners. Hebrews chapter 9. Hebrews chapter 9. In verse 26. Well, let's start with verse 24. For Christ did not enter holy places made with hands, mere copies of the true ones, but into heaven itself, now to appear in the presence of God for us. Nor was it that he would offer himself often, as the high priest enters the holy places year by year with blood that is not his own. Otherwise, he would have needed to suffer often since the foundation of the world. But now once, at the consummation of the ages, he has been manifested to put away sin by the sacrifice of himself. And inasmuch as it is appointed for men to die once, and after this comes judgment, so Christ also, having been offered once to bear the sins of many, will appear a second time for salvation, without reference to sin, to those who eagerly await him. And so all those bloody sacrifices, all the bloodshed of the animals in the Old Testament, all point to Christ, who once and for all died for sin. Back into our text. Back into our text. Just as the Old Testament points to Christ, so we point to Christ as well. They pointed forward to him. We point backward in history. The only hope that you have is in Jesus. He died, was buried, and he rose again. Someday coming back for us. Back into our text here in verses 5 and 6. He says, surely I will require your lifeblood. From every living thing I will require it. From every man, from each man's brother, I will require the life of man. Whoever sheds man's blood, by man his blood shall be shed. For in the image of God he made man. God is pro-life, as I said. And being pro-life, he demands justice. And we see that how that balances out. Recently there was some controversy. I believe it may have been the Pope or someone said something about how can you be pro-life and still demand the death penalty. But beloved, we do so because God does. God had given them liberty to eat meat of animals. That they were never permitted to eat other men. They were never permitted to kill or to murder people in the sense of murdering. But neither beast nor animal nor person was permitted to spill man's blood, and those who did, there was punishment for it. That word here, require, is a judicial term. God is the judge, and he exacts a strict and severe penalty for infraction of sacred law. If a beast kills a man, then that beast must be put to death. And that happens sometimes, even in our under American law. And if a man kills, murders another man, he is to be put to death. The death penalty. The wording here is from every man's brother. From the hand of every man's brother. It's kind of how it's worded here. I don't think he means family revenge slayings or anything like that, but rather to stress the fact that all men are indeed related and responsible to see that justice is executed. All peoples of the earth, regardless of the color of skin or background or nation or tongue, all of these things, we're all related. We all come from Noah. Further back, we all come from Adam. And we're all responsible for justice since God has made us so. That doesn't mean that each one of us is to enact justice. If we go on into the New Testament and we read Romans chapter 13, we know that the sword of justice is held by the government. Well, we ought to demand that our government enact that sword the way that it should be. The reason man could kill animals, but neither animals nor man could kill man, is because man alone is created in the image of God. We're not evolved to be some higher form of an animal. We're made in God's image. And that ought to be taught everywhere from a very young age all the way until we get old. That there is a difference. There is a difference. You go out hunting for squirrels, that's okay. That's okay. That's perfectly acceptable. But when we talk about human beings, there is a difference. There is a difference. In verse 7, he says, "As for you, be fruitful and multiply, swarm on the earth and multiply in it." Again, God is repeating himself here. He says, "Be fruitful and multiply." And he uses that word swarm. That word swarm. That's the way it's translated here anyway. The Hebrew word is shararts, and it's used elsewhere. I'm probably mispronouncing the Hebrew, but anyway, that's okay. It's used elsewhere. For instance, the plagues in Egypt, when the frogs came in Exodus chapter 8, it was a swarm of frogs. And that's what he's talking about here. It describes extreme abundance. Extreme abundance. It emphasizes the abundant provision of life after nearly all of it was destroyed in the flood. You think about this. Noah and his family, they got off that ark and everything was destroyed, gone. It was barren. But God is promising, even in that terrible time of seeing everything gone, that Yahweh God is promising that all will be well again. I don't know what the population was before the flood, but I'm told that there would have been perhaps billions of people on the earth. And now it's down to just 8. God will provide. And he did provide. Noah and his family were given that word from God. You and I, we don't get audible words from God. We don't have visions or dreams and all that. But in our world, we do have a word from him. It's right here in his book. You want to hear a word from God? Read his word. If you want to hear an audible word from God, read it out loud. Read his word out loud. You'll get that comforting word, that reassurance that everything's going to be all right. But only for the child of God. It's not going to be all right for those who reject his word. It's not going to be all right for those who rebel against him. Judgment is coming. Just like it came to that world way back yonder in Noah. Not exactly. There won't be a worldwide flood, but judgment is coming to this world in the form of fire to all those who die without Jesus Christ. So it's not all going to be all right for everybody, but for those who know him, we can depend on him, we can trust him, and we can rest in him. Verses 8 through 10, then God spoke to Noah, to his sons with him, saying, "As for me, behold, I establish my covenant with you and with your seed after you, and with every living creature that is with you, be the birds, the cattle, every beast of the earth with you, of all that comes out of the ark, even every beast of the earth." There seems to be maybe there was a pause between the previous part and this part. I don't know how much time elapses. It's anybody's guess. But this covenant that God establishes with Noah and his descendants. By the way, who's a descendant of Noah? You, them, those people back there. Everybody on this earth is a descendant of Noah. Doesn't matter color of skin, tribal background, what continent they may be from. This covenant with Noah and his descendants was also with the animals who had left the ark and their descendants. Now, there is a difference between man and the animals. We've mentioned that multiple times, but animals are not human and humans are not animals, but God does have a concern for the animals. And we can thank the Lord for that. This is and we'll not take time to go there, but go in there and read the last part of Jonah and see how God has a concern for animals. Read through the Psalms and see some of those Psalms there. But this is the first covenant that God made with man. We call it the Noahic covenant. Verse 11, he says, "Indeed, I establish my covenant with you, and all flesh shall never again be cut off by the water of the flood. There shall never again be a flood to destroy the earth." Once again, God is not promising that there'll never be a local flood in the earth. There have been local floods in this world. We've seen terrible destructions from those in Ohio and North Carolina and Texas and Mississippi and different places, all within recent times. No, this was not a local flood in Noah's day, and he wasn't promising that he would never send a local flood in the future. He was promising that there would never again be a worldwide flood, that he would never destroy the earth in a worldwide flood, a global flood. Verses 12 through 15. Then God said, "This is the sign of the covenant which I am giving to be between me and you and every living creature that is with you for all successive generations. I put my bow in the cloud. It shall be for a sign of a covenant between me and the earth. And it will be when I bring a cloud over the earth that the bow will be seen in the cloud. I will remember my covenant, which is between me and you and every living creature of all flesh. Never again shall the water become a flood to destroy all flesh." The sign of the covenant, he says, I'm going to put there as a reminder. For perpetual generations, a bow in the cloud. We call it the rainbow. Everybody loves a rainbow. I don't know of anybody who doesn't love a rainbow. The rainbow appears in the sky and everybody looks up and says, "Look at that rainbow. It's so beautiful." Now, some in our generation have made it into something perverted, but a rainbow is a beautiful thing. A rainbow is a bent or curved line in the sky, composed or consisting of 7 colors. In school, we memorized those colors. Roy G. Biv was how we remembered it. Red, orange, yellow, green, blue, indigo, and violet. That's how we remembered the colors of the rainbow. Now, I'm told in England, children remember it a little bit different. Richard of York in vain. But however way you remember it, the colors are always the same, in the same order. No matter where you see it, no matter where it appears. Now, how is that possible? Because we live in an orderly world that was made and created by an orderly creator. And Yahweh God has given us this sign as a covenant, as a remembrance, as we think about this time so long ago. Now, I could go into the scientific reasons why the rainbow appears, and it's kind of hard to tell whether the rainbows had been showing up before Genesis chapter 9, and maybe Yahweh God took that and said, from now on, this is going to be a sign for this, or if he just made it at that point and set the things in motion, and they made the law that those things would apply from that day forward. I don't know. Maybe when we get to heaven, that's one of the things I'll ask about. But the Bible's not clear there. But whatever the case may be, we know what it means now because the answer's in Genesis, the history book of the universe. Usually we see a rainbow right after it's rained. And how fitting is that the rain has fallen, the sun comes out, and we see the rainbow there as a reminder that no more will God destroy the world with a worldwide flood. Rainbows are a beautiful reminder of the fact that even though God did at one time destroy this world with a great flood, he isn't going to do that again. At least not with a flood. So isn't it terrible that so many have perverted it in our day and age? It ought not to be that way. Verses 16 and 17, so the bow shall be in the cloud, and will look upon it to remember the everlasting covenant between God and every living creature of all flesh that is on the earth. And God said to Noah, this is the sign of the covenant which I have established between me and all flesh that is on the earth. Not only would man see it, not only do we see it, but God sees it. I can't help but think, every time I see a rainbow, I'm reminded that God sees it too. Great comfort to those who had survived the flood. And remember, Noah and his sons lived for hundreds of years after the flood. And so they would have seen many rainbows in their lifetime. What a great comfort it was to them as they thought back to this time. They lost so many friends and loved ones in that flood. What a great reminder it was that God would not do that again. There would be great local floods, earthquakes, volcanoes, cold winters, and even immediately following the worldwide flood, there was that terrible, it wasn't as long as what the evolutionists say, but it was an ice age. You know the ice age is recorded in the Bible too? Read through the book of Job and you'll find plenty of references to snow and ice and all of those things. But as they lived through those things, they were reminded and took comfort. This was an everlasting covenant, a covenant that was not based upon any action of the people, but based upon God's goodness and long-suffering, and praise God for that. That means, in spite of how terrible things get here on this earth, in this generation, God's not going to change his mind. Yahweh God is not going to say, you know what, this generation is so terrible, maybe I ought to do the same thing again. No, this covenant is based upon his goodness, his long-suffering, and not on what we do, not on what they do, not on what's going on here. And even though it is perverted in our culture so many times, we can still trust his word above whatever else is going on. And so I thank God for Genesis chapter 9 and the record that we have. You'll not find this in any other history book. In fact, the world's history books, they got some crazy ideas about where the rainbow came from and all those sorts of things. But only the Bible gives us the accurate record. So let's rejoice in our God's promises and the world that Noah and his family stepped out on. The fact that God had preserved Noah and his family, that Noah found grace, found favor in the eyes of Yahweh. May God add the blessing to the preaching of his word. Does anybody have any questions this evening?